Good afternoon and welcome to the Iowa City Foreign Relations Council. We have a program today featuring our guest, Dr. Biagio Andò. And thanks to Dr. Andò and to everyone who has joined us in person and online today. My name is John Reitz. I'm the Edward Carmody Professor of Law Emeritus at the Iowa College of Law and a member of the Iowa City Foreign Relations Council's Program Committee. ICFRC wants to acknowledge and thank its annual donors, members, and sponsors and partners for all their support. And this list includes the Iowa Arts Council through the Iowa Department of Cultural Affairs, Humanities Iowa and the National Endowment for the Humanities, the University of Iowa's International Programs, Honors Program, and Public Policy Center, the Stanley UI Foundation Support Organization, Midwest One Bank, Taxes Plus, Channel and City Channel 4 for providing online access to ICFRC's programs, along with the UI Library Archives. I do want to read our Native American land acknowledgement that we always start our program with. ICFRC has adopted the Native American land acknowledgement prepared for the City of Iowa City's Ad hoc Truth and Reconciliation Council Commission and the Human Rights Commission. The ICFRC recognizes that our home community of Iowa City now occupies the homelands of Native American nations, to whom we owe our commitment and dedication. The full text of ICFRC's acknowledgement is on its website at icfrc.org. As we get started, I'd like to cover some Zoom etiquette tips. Most of you probably know all this already, but it's worth repeating. This is the time to make sure you know where your video and audio mute and unmute buttons are located. You are already muted, so we ask you to please keep your audio and video turned off for the duration of the presentation so that you do not interrupt the speaker, and that makes the transmission much better. Following our speaker's presentation at about 12:45, we will have a 15-minute Q&A. You will be able to submit your questions via the chat function. So at that time, we invite you to turn on your video, but please keep your audio muted until you have a chance to speak to avoid any background noise. I would now like to introduce Dr. Biagio Andò. Dr. Biagio Andò earned his basic law degree and his PhD in law at the University of Catania in Sicily. He is currently a professor of comparative law at the University of Catania and is visiting us at the Iowa College of Law as a visiting research scholar during this fall semester, 2022. He has deepened his understanding of islands through several stints as a visiting lecturer at the University of Malta and research stays at the British Institute of International and Comparative Law. He has also conducted research at the Max Planck Institute in Hamburg, at McGill University in Montreal, Canada, and at the Paul M. Hebert Law Center at Louisiana State University, all great centers of comparative law on this continent. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Andò, who will talk about his reflections on Sicilian insularity. What does it mean to be an island, and what is its role as a meeting place for Europe, Africa, and the Middle East? Thank you very much.
Thank you, John, for your introduction. Thank you to the Iowa City. Can you hear me? I think that you can hear me. Thank you to the Iowa City Foreign Relations Council. It's for me a pleasure, an honor to be with you and to share with you some remarks moving from my experience, personal experience. I'm not a historian, I'm not a sociologist or anthropologist. I have the privilege of the advantage to be born in Sicily and to live in Sicily. And therefore, when with Professor Reitz, we discussed the possibility of having a talk about insularity and what needs to live, to be an islander, if I may use this expression, I was very happy. There are also two underlying reasons for the choice of the topic, who steered my decision to try to to talk with you, to have a dialogue with you about this topic. One was a conference held in Catania and organized by an interdisciplinary center of research on the culture of risks, jointly with the University of Catania in July 2022. And this conference was focused on a recent reform involving island and insularity. So it's part of our talk today. The second major reason, I realized that afterwards, not immediately, which strongly suggested me to focus on this topic, was the theme or the array of themes I am working on during my stay here at the College of Law in Iowa. My topic here is privacy, information privacy. And I realized that there is a strong but hidden link between privacy and the topic of insularity, which is not immediate, which is not intuitive, but there is a link. The link is made by this. While privacy is usually framed as the right to be let alone, a choice to be far apart from the community or to control the invasion, the intrusion in your sphere. So it's a way of keeping distance between society, community at large, and the individual. Well, insularity is the ill-fated situation of being let alone. So it's the opposite end of the spectrum, but there is a line between the two. They may be located at the opposite end of spectrum. So insularity is a side of a coin, if you allow me this expression, a dark side of the coin of privacy. And of course, I will share with you some very general remarks about my experience and some autobiographical and other remarks related to legal and social political issue. Sicily is an island and is not a standard island. You have to imagine that is more than 10,000 miles, and its population, according to a survey of 2019, a quite recent survey, is above 5 million. So it's a big island, a huge island, a continent. Just to quote from a great writer's words, a continent. So a mix of different things, of different landscape, of different people. And of course, it may be astonishing to talk about an island and insularity, the perception of being far removed from the peninsula. No, if you look at the PowerPoint, you realize that I just chose one of the possible 1,000 maps, but which is quite clear. We are singling out Sicily, which is the toe of the boot. Italy is usually compared to a boot, and the toe of the boot is Sicily. And we are immersed, we are surrounded by the Mediterranean Sea. So it's an island. It's far removed from the peninsula. You have to get a ferry to go from Sicily to Calabria, which is the closest part in the peninsula. You have to get a flight to arrive and to get to the main cities in Italy. Otherwise, going by car is too time consuming. So you have the perception of being far apart and far from the rest. But at the same time, and quite paradoxically, our history is a history of many domination, many eras. So, and we are in a space, an open space, the Mediterranean Sea, which has been, was in the past and is in the present, with on different bases, but is a crowded space. The Mediterranean is something which affected us, which affected our identity as Sicilian people, which affected the identity of all the people living by the Mediterranean, whose coasts are on the Mediterranean. An open space which was a place of meeting, of exchanging, a network of communication, which was affected but affects. So it's a geographical place, of course, as Sicily is a geographical place. But what I want to stress and to highlight that beyond this dimension, this physical dimension, what is particularly interesting, at least from my viewpoint, is the fact that there are also powerful symbols, powerful metaphors underlying places, physical places. And Mediterranean is a symbol, is a discourse, has been at the center of many surveys carried on by historians. Let just me quote the main work by a French historian, Brodel, on Mediterranean, as a place of identities, a continent which has shaped ways of living, economic relation, and distinctive cultures, also legal culture. There are some studies carried out by legal anthropologists emphasizing the fact that Mediterranean has been an area which express a distinctive legal culture. So there is something which is powerful. And I chose, as the second image I share with you, an image of Mediterranean, which is not a realistic, an accurate, a precise image. It's not a photo of Mediterranean, but it expresses the role of bridge which was typical to Mediterranean. If you look at this map is not, as you see, does not reflect or is not common, is not close to the previous image. You see, here there is an open space, and we have Italy. Here we have lands which are approaching. So it's Mediterranean is like a connective tissue between lands. And if you look at the way in which Italy and Sicily was represented, you can realize the symbolic and metaphoric force of this image. As many ancient maps, ancient maps are precious, are significant, because they carry to the observer some meaning and some messages which reflect the thought and the representation of their author. And this image, powerful, represent this capacity, this ability, this power of Mediterranean of putting together. And of course, when you speak about Mediterranean, you try also to single out major features of an identity. What means to be Mediterranean? What means to be Sicilian? Take an account of the fact that we experience, as I said at the very beginning, several dominations, several eras. Our history starts from Phoenicians, to be honest, starts even before. We had Greeks, we had Roman, we have Byzantine, Arabs, we experience a wide gamut of domination of culture, which end as a result in a mixed identity, in a rich, composite, convoluted identity, in a gumbo, if I may use this word, which also is witnessed by the different traits and character of population. We have Sicilian who look like Arabs, and we have Sicilian who look like Normans, quite often in the same family. My family is a litmus test of what I'm saying. I have some cousins, some relatives who are with red hair, blue eyes, and freckles, and other cousins who are dark, really dark. One of my cousins was, by joke, dubbed in my family as Otello. The main feature, one of the characters depicted by Shakespeare, just to witness how different may be the result of a very long history. And when you conceive of Sicily, when you try to think Sicily, you quite often think Sicily as a microcosm which is mirrored by some characters who embody this mixed character, the so-called anima romana, the Roman soul, rationalistic, and an Arab soul, anima araba. In this image, this is one of the several images I found online of a character who is quite popular in Sicily. Probably this is the mainstream narrative taken by Arabs. His name is Jufa, Giufa with the accent. In this image, you find an adult, long and with a hat. In other images, you can find a short man with a beard and a turban. In other, again, you can find a young kid. Jufa, why Jufa is, in my opinion, one of the possible hint or clue to our identity, because he's a mix of several character and stereotype which molded and shaped our identity. Jufa is a simple man or a simple boy, a bit like Forrest Gump, just to quote one of the character you know. But also he's wise and intelligent. He enshrines and embodies a mood toward the revolt against legal authorities. He's wise and ingenuous, intelligent, shrewd, and naive. It's a mix. It's a mix like Odysseus, the character of Homer, the main character of Odyssey, who is not a hero, is a man who is able to survive, to go through the manifold experiences he has during his travel, which is a travel of knowledge, which is a way in which Odysseus acquires knowledge. And Odysseus and Jufa are two among the possible many others symbols of a composite identity. When I talk about stereotypes or features, well, there are several which may spring to our mind and which to a certain extent mirror some characteristics. Of course, you cannot fully rely on stereotypes because they overemphasize reality, but to a certain extent, taken with a grain of salt, they may be helpful to understand what you are looking at, the identity of people, the identity of an island, the identity of Sicily and Mediterranean. I emphasized before the fact that Jufa is maybe or is in some stories which are told by parent or grandparent to young kids, is a symbol of revolt against the legal authority, the abuse of power of legal authority. And to a certain extent, this character is in Sicilians, mirrors a part of the identity of Sicilian. The fact that there are several social order, and the official order, the legal one, is a bit mistrusted, is seen or considered with a certain degree of suspicion. Therefore, there is a penchant, a favor by Mediterranean people or Sicilian to go for some quibblesome interpretation of legal rules. And there are also concurring social orders. Not any of this is legal, but there are other social orders other than the official ones. The primacy of family bonds over other social bonds is a characteristic which has been effectively witnessed by a huge amount of books, novels, movies, and of course, these are features important to keep in mind. A certain degree of fear towards the future. You have to realize that in the Sicilian dialect, there is not the future verb tense. There is only the present and the past. We do not have future. We do not have verbs expressing future. And this is quite interesting to have a flavor of our mind framework, a certain degree of a defeatist attitude, which is also typical to other islands. If you just look, that the discourse would take too much time. If you have a look at a powerful novel by Salvatore Satta, was a great law scholar, civil procedure, and he was a great novelist, who wrote Il giorno del giudizio. On Sardinia, you have this flavor of this mood of insularity, of mistrust, of closeness towards what is outside. But in the case of Sicily, you have a mix of not coherent or probably contradictory facts. You have the closeness, mistrust, but at the same time, you may realize that there is a certain degree of openness. Sicily is a metaphor, as Leonardo Sciascia said. Leonardo Sciascia was one of our greatest novelists, now nearly forgotten, unfortunately. He was born in 1921, and he passed away in 1989. And he released this book, interview with Marcel Padovani, a French writer, who is quite interestingly titled La Sicilia come metafora, Sicily as a metaphor. What is at the bulk, at the core of Leonardo Sciascia thought, who gave us marvelous novels, politically committed, on the past history of Sicily, witnessing some problems of the present, and it was what French call intellectuel engagé, a committed intellectual, an intellectual which is deeply committed and deeply involved in society and in politics. Well, Leonardo Sciascia say that Sicily may be an interesting standpoint to look at some problems of which are Italian and not simply Sicilian. Problem related to societal issue, to political issue. In this case, is Sicily may carry us beyond, which is the original meaning of metaphor from the Greek, to carry beyond. Metaphor allow us to go beyond the simple reality, the simple description of reality, and to unravel, unearth the hidden meanings which a complex reality such as Sicily has. And of course, when we talk about insularity and islands, there is not this rich set of meanings which literature, movies, art, generally speaking, shares with us. There are some reforms taking account of the problem in island experiences. We had a recent reform, as I say, that might start passed in July 2022 by our parliament, who constitutional reform, who introduces in an article of the constitution, the Italian constitution, the article 119, a passage concerning island and southern Italy called Il Mezzogiorno, which was an issue for Italy, because the reality is that Italy has inside several Italies, and southern Italy has typical peculiarities. I use a neutral term, just not to use worse terms, that make difficult to think of Italy as a unitary and homogeneous country. This country has inside several countries. Southern and islands are a part of this problem. And in the bill, the popular initiative bill, which spearheaded this reform, it was expressly stated that insularity was a serious and permanent handicap, is a serious and permanent natural disadvantage. Why this strong expression? Because, of course, islands and Sicily do have, because of some geographical characteristic, do have problems which other parts of the country doesn't have or doesn't experience to the same extent. Let's think about the problem of transport, of communication. I told you that we have to get a ferry boat to go from Sicily to Calabria. You have to wait half an hour, 1 hour for the ferry, and the ferry takes another half an hour, and afterwards you need 30 more minutes to go off the ferry boat. So you experience a large amount of time, which makes you aware of what it means to go or to move from an island and go to the peninsula. You experience it physically. Of course, communication, the problem of transport, is not the only one. And we have been talking for decades. You have to imagine 5 or 6 decades about a bridge. Oh, only 15 minutes left. Oh, unfortunately, times run fast. We have been speaking of a bridge which has not been still built due to the resistance by environmentalists or persons who have a deep-seated fear of intervention by criminal groups, because it's a big business. But of course, this bridge would help us to connect, to ensure the connection which is lacking. We have a problem with the economic system, because our economy is over specialized and seasonal. So the qualification, the frame of words which were at the very beginning used, a serious and permanent disadvantage was something which was quite realistic, but faded away in the text which was passed. The lawmaker acknowledged simply the fact that the island are or provide peculiarities. So peculiar trait, which may be good or bad, but not necessarily a disadvantage, a permanent disadvantage. This dark representation, which was at the backstage of the initiative, the legislative initiative, is repeated and echoed at a European level. Even Europe witnesses that islands, the topic of islands, is a topic of European interest. There is a resolution passed in May called Resolution Omergé, by the name of the person, the member of parliament, which was its promoter, that saying that island is a typical European problem. More than 20 million of European citizens live in Ireland, more or less. More than three. I'll get on back to this number, but it's a problem involving millions of persons and people living in small island. So what Omergé calls for is a strategy European, is a European strategy for island, because island need an effort, a cooperative effort of Europe. And when you think about island or insularity, you think about the problem of migration. This is another very thought-provoking theme and very challenging theme, which in the last year plagued our Italian and European debate. What to do with migrant, illegal migrant, because I emphasized at the very beginning that history, the Mediterranean history, is an history made by crossings, by sharing, by exchanging. But in the present is also a reality of migration, of economic migrants. You see in the map, I selected this image just to show you in nuce, in a nux, in a nut, what means migration and which are the possible migration routes. Of course, Italy is the first landing post in this migration. We carrying many problems, also many public order, many legal problems. The Mediterranean in the central route is directed towards Lampedusa and Sicily as the first harboring land. Which is Lampedusa? Lampedusa is this small island, beautiful island, beautiful. It's a jewel from an environmental point of view. And you see that Lampedusa is in this is a small point midway between Africa and Sicily. This is the first landing point, and media provide us with image of rust bucket overloaded with migrants. Many photos, many images are taken from Lampedusa. Lampedusa is an island in an island because it embodies, enshrines the problem we are facing, a problem which is social, political, legal, economic. Of course, managing migration involves many millions of euros. There was a survey, a recent survey carried last year, saying that in the period 2014-2020, we the expense for due to the management of migration issues was more than 4 billion euro, 4.4 billions. What came from Europe was simply 847 millions. For this reason, Europe allowed some budgetary slippages. You know that we have some bonds. The budget of European countries is controlled by the center of Europe, so that any country may be a problem for the others. But due to the fact that we manage alone this issue alone, and Europe was yes, speaking of solidarity and of cooperation, but nothing was made. We have still the Dublin regulation of 2013. Many reforms were proposed by Juncker, by also Ursula von der Leyen in 2020, aimed at making possible a mechanism of solidarity, and nothing was still made, and of course we experienced the most severe, most serious flows of migration in the past year. The 2015 was the annus horribilis, the darkest year in the recent era for the entire Europe. More than 1 million of migrants came from North Africa and moved towards Europe, because many migrants want to go to the Northern Europe. The fact is that Europe has diverse souls inside. There is a group, the Visegrad group, which is adverse to the mechanism of solidarity. Poland, Hungary, Slovakia were resistant. And therefore, we are doubly, in a double sense, insulated. We have a problem in the management of our issues, which are objective issues related to our characteristic, and we have to manage also problems coming from abroad. So there was a Latin maxim, I'm closing, reading, intrant securi, qui querunt vivere puri. And so it may be a motto for the migration. Only those who want to live honestly are accepted, are welcome. But as a matter of fact, we are still experiencing, less than in the past, migration, daily arrival in Lampedusa. So insularity, and at the same time an overcrowding of people. So Mediterranean is still the center of exchanges and of lives of different population. What we can say? Well, there is not a conclusion. I leave aside a part which was devoted to the technology as a way to cope with some issues related to violence. But what I can say is that we have to get the immense richness of experiences, different cultures, different lives. This is a real advantage of insularity. Of course, we are not to be left alone by the central government, our central government, and by Europe. Together we can make it. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Joe Andò. So that was a very spirited tour through a lot of history and geography. Let me read our statement for the change here. We move now to the question and answer portion of our meeting. And those of you who have questions, please submit them via the chat function. At the bottom of your viewing screen, there's a button you can press and write a chat message. Feel free to turn on your video function now, but please keep yourself muted, keep the audio muted unless you need to ask a follow-up to your question, if I ask your question. While we're waiting for questions to come in, ICFRC wants to thank its members and donors for their support, as always. And if you would like to join ICFRC or make a gift to support its program, please go to our website. Again, that's icfrc.org. Thank you very much. Now, let's see if we have any. I'm going to need to go out of sharing here, I think.
Yeah, sure.
So I can see the chat function. And I don't see any questions coming in. So please feel free to ask your questions of Dr. Andò. While you're thinking about that, I'm going to pose one question for Dr. Andò. I wondered, when we talked about this earlier, you had kind of indicated that Sicily may have some function as a meeting place for Europe and Africa and whatnot. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, yes, there is a. This is one of the implied or hidden layers during my talk. We experienced this historically. We were a meeting point for different cultures, and we took many things, many characters. Some of our city are the living world and living witness of these different rules. We may be a meeting point because, of course, we are closer due to our history and the culture to some African characteristics. So if you go to Trapani, for example, you really have the flavor of some African dishes. You feel to be closer to Africa than Europe, but at the same time we are in Europe. So the meeting point, my idea of meeting point, is that not necessarily different world must clash. They may be made compatible, coherent, and they may enrich reciprocally, sharing some of their experiences. In this sense, Sicily is in Europe, and quoting from another novel of a Sicilian author, Giuseppe Tomasi di Lampedusa, and there are other movies. And John Tomasi di Lampedusa says this, that Sicilian may become citizens of the world, may move, may take their Sicilian culture outside, keeping their identity, but combining their previous original identity with other identities. So the island insularity, the fact that you are an islander, you are an inhabitant of islands, does not necessarily signify that you will be doomed to be alone for the rest of your life. You can. We have important examples of person who moved and who come back, because the problem is this, or the advantage, when people come back after they retired from work or even before, they carry with them the wide gamut of experiences they absorbed, and they may be, in this sense, in this way, a meeting point. So against the view which says that the identity has to be preserved, has to be necessarily pure, there is not such a thing as a pure identity. Everyone, each of us, has an experience which is mixed. We are the hybrid byproduct of several forces, and this is a richness. This is a way of being less alone in the world, and less stupid and more open, I would say.
we have another question from people who are interested in your mention of literature. So someone was specifically asking, what sort of reading in contemporary Sicilian literature could you recommend? What authors?
Well, there are some authors who are now quite well known. Camilleri. I talked to Patrick Glenn, that you know, when I was at McGill. I have an exchange with Patrick Glenn, and he knew Camilleri. Camilleri is a Sicilian, not filmmaker, but theater author, who wrote in his late 60s a character who became quite famous, Commissario Montalbano. Montalbano has been translated in many languages. Natalia Auci, about the saga of the Florio family. We was a family of entrepreneurs, really important. The Agnelli, now Fiat, no, is one of the leading families in Italy, now less. But Florio were, at their time, the Agnelli of present times. Leonardo Sciascia, another who I may mention, and another Greek brilliant, whose language is terse and elegant, is an European author and a Sicilian author at the same time, not so much Italian, is Gesualdo Bufalino, who wrote several amazing novels. One is Diceria dell'Untone, 1981, who rings a bell, because it's the second scene is in a sanatorium, like Montagna Incantata, like Thomas Mann, Magic Mountain. No, there is this scenario of illness, which is a conquered paradise for the major character. These are, in my opinion, the leading authors: Sciascia, Bufalino, Camilleri. But there are other Consolo. So there is a wide gamut of Sicilian author. I don't know. No, Sebastiano Vassalli is not Sicilian, but has Sicilian origin.
Well, we'll have to hope that some of those have been translated into English. That's always the big problem. Let's see. Yeah, we have another
climate change
talk here about the
climate change.
About climate change. Yeah, if we could talk about the impact of climate change.
Well, we are experiencing. I share with you a quite banal remark, quite obvious, but it's true. We have an Italian motto saying, "Non ci sono più le mezze stagioni." We do not have mid-season. There is no spring. There is no autumn. There is a winter and a terrible hot summer, which was always hot, but now in the last 2 decades has become hotter and hotter, and this is a problem. I told Professor Wright when I came here, arrived in Iowa. Oh, it's a paradise, because you know the August in Sicily is over 40 degrees centigrades. Is a wet weather, and it's terrible. I think I strongly suggest to visit Sicily in May, June. There is my wife here who can witness, Daniela, and or September, October. These are definitely the most beautiful months to visit Sicily. You can go and visit around. You can go to the seaside till October. You can have, you can swim. You can go to the seaside. About its island neighbors, well, I'm not sure. My island neighbors. You mean Calabria and other, or Africans? We have, as I said, a huge, a very long history of exchange with Africa, and we share something. We, you know, there are some implicit meanings that make a culture, a given culture of neighboring countries, quite simple to understand. So my neighbor, I would say that we are definitely open towards neighbors. Of course, I cannot be silent about some swift, some changes which may occur in this political period, because as you know, we have a new government, and in this government there are some far-right leaders. Of course, these far-right leaders were always have been always against exchange, against openness, and this, I think, could have an impact. But generally speaking, we have a good attitude, a good mood towards our neighbors.
I think the question might have been particularly, specifically about climate impact on these other islands, like.
Well, we had several severe events in the last months in islands, in island like Lipari, Vulcano, sea event, so a very strong sea with invasion of the coast, and we were not used to that. This is if I may make recalls to my memory, I had a strong, it's actually my memory, an event I experienced in 1994, which was the first event of heavy rain, which ended also in dead people, we had in Sicily. This was not something which we were used to. In the last decade, as already said, we have been experiencing severe changes, and we are a bit worried. We have emergency event like the weather bug app you shared with me, John. When there is a storm approaching, well, we close our school. Our city has experienced last year. There were you can find on the internet some photos of Duomo di Catania, the center, the downtown of the city, which was invaded by water. So you quite nearly covered the cars. Something which resembled or looked like a movie scene, but it's real. It's real.
We have another question about Russian investment in Sicily. Is it true that there's a Lukoil refinery in Sicily now? And in any event, what has been the impact of the Ukrainian war on Sicily?
There has not been a direct impact. The Ukraine-Russian war had a severe impact on the flow of migrants, especially in the first months. And Italy, of course, was one of the countries, but was not the most impacted by the migration spurred by war. We met, I and my wife, who is here, we met some kids from Ukraine who fled in the aftermath of the war, and of course there is not a peculiar feeling typically Sicilian. We lived in the emergency, but we experienced more directly other flows of migration. So about the economic interest in Sicily, I do not have a lot of information to share with you. Yes, as far as I know, there is an involvement, but unfortunately, I will deepen this aspect, and I will share with John the information I have. But there is not a strong coverage, at least in the Sicilian media, about this.
Okay.
There is more coverage of other Russian interests in northern Italy. But in Sicily, definitely, generally speaking, I'm not particularly informed about
here's a kind of a general historical question, but it is probably one that has occurred to many people. Why is Malta a separate country, but Sicily is not?
Well, you know, we come back to an ignited debate which was particularly strong in the 30s and in the 40s. We have a movement called the Separatisti, Attilio Castrogiovanni, for example, who spearheaded a sort of revolt against the central state. And as a matter of fact, we have a special degree of autonomy. I was running out of time and I was not able to say that, but Sicily is, with other 4 regions, so-called regioni a statuto speciale, regions under a special statute. It's an awkward translation, of course, to mean what? That we enjoy a special, peculiar status from a fiscal, legislative, and administrative viewpoint. So we have a higher degree of autonomy in several areas: tourism, forest service, agriculture, vis-a-vis the other region. Other regions a statuto speciale are Sardinia, Trentino Alto Adige, Valle d'Aosta, and so another island. Because the constituent was aware of the fact that some territory needed a stronger degree of autonomy, and in this way, it was also possible to mitigate some pushes towards autonomy. But I ask myself, what would be Sicily like an autonomous nation? I don't see a pink future for Sicily as an autonomous nation. We need the central state. We need to be in Italy. We quite often we weren't able to exploit the higher degree of autonomy that the Constitution gave us. For several factors, because of several factors. So I'm a bit pessimistic about the possibility of an autonomous Sicily. These would enhance, I think, some severe and serious factors, not going to the benefit, but to the detriment of the same Sicily. Malta, yes, is a separate nation. This is quite interesting. We have strong links with Malta. I personally have some strong links with some friends. Some close friends of mine are from Malta, and Malta was really smart to use and enjoy its location to be autonomous and to be a port, a transit port. So he played in 2 different areas. Okay. So okay. I think that we are running out of time.
Yeah.
I thank you very much.
We could obviously have Dr. Andò speak a lot longer to us. He has a lot more to tell. But I think we unfortunately have to call this presentation to a close. But we have really appreciated it, Biagio. I'm honored to present you right now virtually, I'm sorry to say, the highly coveted ICFRC mug. We give this to every speaker. So I'll definitely go get one for you, but I didn't get it in time to hand it to you today.
Okay.
But I will take care of that. Let me remind the audience as we're concluding that ICFRC's last program for the fall semester will be held on Thursday, December 8th at 12 noon via Zoom. And Daniel Teklu will present an international law perspective on the Nile water dispute, which is really quite an important dispute in Northern Africa. ICFRC will send you the registration information via email later this week. If you've already registered, if you haven't already registered, go to our website and register. Thanks for joining us today. We are adjourned, and thank you again.
Thank you also for the mug. I will think of you while using.
Great. Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.